I didn't walk out of that room the same way I walked in. The woman who walked in was bracing for impact, already bleeding from wounds they couldn't see. A ghost in her own family. A name that lived only in whispers and sideways glances. The woman who walked in had spent a decade believing her story ended the day she left, with no footnotes, no explanation, no one left to care. But the woman who walked out, she wasn't erased. She was heard. Eli's small hand was still in mine, warm and grounding. The corridor outside the lawyer's office was quiet, just the distant hum of a vending machine and the faint click of Karen's heels, long gone now. That silence used to terrify me. Now, it wrapped around me like a soft blanket. Not empty, just full of everything we never said. I stopped beside the elevator and looked down at him. "You kept it safe," I said. He smiled a little. "I just wanted you to hear him." And I had. Not just the man in the video, but the father I thought I'd lost forever. His voice, cracked and tired, saying my name like it still meant something. I didn't even realize how much I needed that, how much I'd hung my worth on a sentence I thought would never come. I was wrong. 3 words, 10 years too late. And still, they mattered. Forgiveness is strange like that. It doesn't come wrapped in ribbon or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes as a whisper through a screen, or in the way your son looks at you, like you're the strongest person in the world, even when you're still learning how to stand. I'm not sure I've forgiven him. Not fully. There's a part of me still curled tight around the ache, still mourning the years Eli will never get back with his grandfather, still angry at how easily the world believes the loudest voice in the room. But maybe this is what healing looks like. Not forgetting. Not pretending. Just choosing to keep walking, even when you're not sure where the path leads. Before the elevator doors closed, I turned for one last look at that room. The chairs were empty now. But I saw the shadow of what happened there, of a girl who came to bury her pain and left with something quietly defiant. Not revenge, not victory, just truth. And sometimes that's louder than anything else. So if you're still here, still listening, still feeling this in your chest, maybe this story wasn't just mine. Maybe it's yours too. And if, just maybe, you've ever carried the weight of being misjudged, unheard, or quietly erased, then you already know what it means when truth finally speaks for you. Leave a piece of your story below, if you want, like this if you felt it. And if you're someone who believes the quietest voices often carry the deepest truths, you'll always have a home here at Revenge Her Way. No one spoke. The screen went black, and for the first time in years, the silence in that room wasn't cruel. It was sacred. Karen was frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the table like it might save her from drowning. Her face had lost all its sharpness, lips parted slightly as if she had something to say but couldn't find a single word. Even her husband, Neil, smug just moments ago, sat stone still, eyes darting between her and the now silent screen. Rick, on the other hand, didn't freeze. He boiled. "Unbelievable," he muttered, pushing himself up from his chair. His voice cracked with something that wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being seen for who he really was. But even he couldn't argue, not with a time-stamped video. Not with my father's voice echoing through that room, raw and unfiltered. Mr. Connor sat quietly, his hand still resting on the laptop, like even he wasn't ready to close the moment. I couldn't speak. My hand was pressed to my mouth, fingertips trembling, but not from grief, from relief. It wasn't about the house or the money or the documents. It was the truth. Spoken aloud, on record, unshakable. He had seen me, after years of erasure, years of being reduced to a rumor, a regret, a whispered poor thing. He had called me by my name. He had looked into that lens and said I was wrong. And that mattered more than anything. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, warm and quiet. I didn't wipe it away. Let them see. Let them finally see. Eli slipped his hand into mine again. His fingers were steady. His head leaned against my arm like he already knew this moment would come. Karen pushed back her chair suddenly, the scraping sound loud and graceless. She stood, grabbed her bag with trembling hands, and walked out, heels clicking against the floor like retreating gunfire. Neil followed, red-faced and muttering something about lawyers and not over yet. Rick stayed a moment longer, his jaw clenched, his eyes refused to meet mine. And then he left too. No words, just the sound of a man realizing the game had ended, and he'd lost. The others followed. The cousins, the family friends. Most avoided my gaze, a few nodded, respect or shame, I couldn't tell. But they left me there, sitting in the same seat they once hoped would stay empty. Only now it belonged to me. Mr. Connor closed the folder slowly. There will be some paperwork, he said gently, but everything's in order. I nodded. I still couldn't find words. My voice was somewhere between tears and breath, caught in the space that only truth can unlock. And in that stillness, with Eli's hand in mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt real, because sometimes the loudest victory is silence. And just as I thought I could finally exhale, Eli looked up at me and whispered, "Do you want to see what else he left you?" "She's not even his daughter." The words snapped across the room like a whip. I hadn't even crossed the threshold when Karen fired the shot. No hello, no eye contact, just that one sentence, sharp enough to draw blood. Laughter rippled from the far side of the room, quick, ugly, half-covered by hands and polite coughs. I felt my son's fingers tighten around mine. Eli, just 10 years old, looked up at me with those wide, steady eyes. He didn't say a word. He never did when the world turned cruel. He just held on, like he always had. The lawyer hadn't even arrived yet. We were all just waiting. Or at least they were. I was surviving. I stood frozen in the doorway of my father's old study, the air thick with cigar smoke and inherited arrogance. Mahogany shelves lined the walls, stacked with books no one read. My father's portrait hung above the fireplace, looking down like he was judging the entire scene from the grave. Karen stood in front of it, like she belonged there. Her gray suit clung to her like armor, her lipstick a violent shade of red that matched the coldness in her voice. "She got nothing," she added, looking straight at me like I was a stain on her shoes. "Dad made sure of it." I forced my lips into a weak, practiced smile. "Good to see you too, Karen," I whispered. Rick, my father's brother, let out a low laugh and leaned back in his chair. "Even her kid knows she doesn't belong," he muttered, eyes flicking to Eli. My son dropped his gaze to the floor, cheeks pink. That did it. My heart didn't just crack, it shattered, clean down the middle. The room wasn't full, but it felt suffocating. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, a couple of Dad's old work friends, some woman I vaguely recognized from church. Not one of them looked at me like I had a right to be there. Not one of them spoke up. And I didn't fight back. I didn't scream. I didn't tell them the truth. I simply nodded and walked to the farthest seat from the table. The chair groaned as I sat, Eli climbing up beside me. His legs dangled above the floor, hands folded in his lap, posture painfully still. My eyes met Karen's again. She smiled, a thin, venom-soaked thing. "This is pointless," she said, like she was commenting on the weather. "Dad said you were dead to him." Maybe I was. Maybe I had been for a long time. But even ghosts come back for a reason. I took a breath and looked down at the polished table, tracing the grain with my fingers, trying to anchor myself to something solid. Eli leaned against my side. I wanted to run, to disappear, to never see these people again. But then he moved. Just slightly. Just enough to let go of my hand and reach into his backpack. That was the moment everything changed. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I couldn't breathe. The night I walked away from that house, with Eli in one arm and a duffel bag in the other, felt like walking through a fire barefoot, every step blistering with judgment. But they didn't see the burns. They only saw the exit. And they made sure to rewrite that scene before the door even closed behind me. "She ran off," Rick said the next day, loud enough for the whole town to hear. Didn't even say goodbye. Blood doesn't walk away from blood. He said it like it was gospel, and people believed it. They always did when it came from a man with a strong voice and a tie pin in the shape of a flag. That was Rick's thing, sounding like he cared while poisoning your name. No one asked what I was running from. No one knew that I had come to my father, shaking and small, begging for help. that I stood on his porch with a baby and a bruise blooming across my collarbone, and he didn't even open the screen door. "You made your bed," he muttered from behind the glass. "Now lie in it." I did. For a while. Until one night I found myself staring at Eli asleep in his crib, and I realized if I stayed, he'd grow up thinking this was normal. That silence was love. That fists were affection. So I packed our lives into 3 bags and disappeared. The calls stopped within weeks. Then the stories started. Karen told everyone I was having a crisis. Rick said I had mental problems. Even my mother's best friend told me, well, it's just not what a daughter does. A daughter stays. A daughter swallows it all and smiles through family dinners. But I didn't stay. And because of that, I was no longer a daughter. They erased my name at every birthday, every holiday. Karen would post family photos, my father surrounded by people who never questioned him, never challenged him, and I was always cropped out. Even when I was there once, years ago, someone blurred my face in a picture online. Eli was too young to remember the worst of it, but he watched me carry it. The loneliness, the whispers at the grocery store, the way people smiled with their mouths and judged with their eyes. He'd hold my hand tighter on those days. Sometimes he'd draw pictures of just the 2 of us, standing under a sky full of stars. No house, no grandparents, just me and him. And that became our life. Quiet. Small. But ours. Still, I carried the ache, the question, the hope. Did he ever regret it? Did my father ever wonder what he'd lost? I never expected an answer. Not until that day in the lawyer's office. Not until Eli reached for his backpack with the kind of calm that only comes when you've been holding on to something big, something secret, something true. I thought it was just a normal visit. One Saturday, nearly a year ago, Eli had asked if he could go with Mrs. Halpern, our neighbor, to drop off a casserole at my father's. I was working late, juggling invoices and a clogged sink, so I said yes. "Just an hour, okay?" I kissed his forehead. "Be polite, don't talk too much." He nodded, slipping on his little sneakers like it was just another errand. No questions, no hesitations, just that strange quiet he always got when something bigger was brewing behind his eyes. I didn't think much of it. When he came home, he didn't say much either. He washed his hands, ate dinner, drew a picture of a tree with a little house beneath it, and put it on the fridge. I asked how the visit went. He shrugged. "It was okay," he said. "Grandpa looks older." I nodded and didn't press. I didn't know how to ask the questions I wanted to ask. Did he talk about me? Did he mention my name? Did he say sorry? But Eli never offered more. And I didn't push. I didn't know that while I was elbow deep in a leaky pipe, my father had opened his door to my son, that they sat together. They sat together maybe in that stuffy old study with the broken globe and the worn armchair. That my father had looked at his grandson, the one I'd raised alone, and seen something that made him hesitate. That for once, he'd set pride aside long enough to say something real. What I didn't know was that he handed Eli an envelope that day. A small white one, folded carefully, with my name scrawled across the front and 4 sharp words underneath. For the lawyer. If it gets ugly. Eli didn't tell me. Not that night, not the next week, not even months later when I cried myself to sleep on his birthday because no one called. He kept it, quietly, carefully, like something sacred. He tucked it in the bottom drawer of his desk, under his comic books and science fair ribbons. He never touched it again until that morning. That morning, when we were getting ready to attend the reading of the will. He wore a little button-up he picked himself. I told him he looked handsome. He said, "You look brave." I didn't see the envelope until the moment he reached into his backpack, his small hand trembling just slightly. "Eli?" I whispered. "What are you doing?" But he didn't answer. His eyes were on the lawyer, on Karen, on the people who had spent 10 years convincing the world I didn't belong. He wasn't just a child in that moment. He was a witness, a protector, and the keeper of my father's final truth. Because what none of us knew, what I couldn't have imagined, was that this little boy had carried redemption in his backpack all along. The moment Eli stood up, the air in the room shifted. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. He just reached into his backpack, pulled out a small white envelope, and held it out toward Mr. Connor, My father's lawyer. The gesture was so calm, so deliberate, it froze the entire room. What's that? Karen snapped, her voice too sharp, too fast, like she already felt control slipping. Mr. Connor adjusted his glasses, took the envelope gently, and examined the front. His expression changed instantly. A flicker of recognition. A breath caught in his throat. My name was written across the top, but beneath it, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words that silenced everything. For the lawyer. If it gets ugly, and it had gotten ugly. Mr. Connor cleared his throat. I wasn't aware this existed, he said carefully. But this is Charles's writing. I'd recognize it anywhere. Karen scoffed, but it was weaker now. Rick muttered something under his breath and leaned forward, suddenly less relaxed than 5 minutes ago. With slow, deliberate hands, Mr. Connor opened the envelope. Inside was a small black USB drive and a handwritten letter, folded twice. He read it silently, lips pressed tight, then looked up. There is a video, he said, recorded by Charles Thomas, your father, shortly before the final version of this will. It was to be played only in the event of dispute. Karen tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat. This is ridiculous. It could be fake. It's been authenticated, Mr. Connor said firmly. Time-stamped, signed, witnessed. Without waiting for permission, he plugged the USB into a laptop sitting at the corner of the table. The screen came to life, black at first, then a faint glow. No music, no title, just one word in the middle, play. I couldn't breathe. My fingers dug into the arms of the chair. My heart slammed against my ribs. Mr. Connor hit the spacebar, and there he was. My father, older, thinner, sitting at the desk I hadn't seen in years, wearing the navy sweater I thought he'd tossed away. His hands were folded, his face was tired, but his voice when it came was clear. Hi, Julia? My name. He said my name. He looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, I'm gone, and I'm guessing things didn't go well. I'm sorry for that, but I need to say something now I should have said years ago. The room was silent, not a breath, not a whisper. I was wrong. The words landed like a thunderclap. He went on, explained everything, how he believed lies, how he let pride speak louder than love, how he shut the door on his own daughter and missed a decade of her life because he thought being strong meant being right. And then, softly, almost like a confession, he said, I changed the will. Karen gasped. Rick cursed under his breath. I've left the house to Julia and Eli. The savings, the retirement fund, it's all theirs. And if anyone in this room is angry about it, good, let them be. My daughter earned peace. She's lived through enough. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred. But one thing was clear. The man they said never loved me had given me everything, and he made sure the last word was his.